So I get this used pool table for 300 bucks, and I know you're not supposed to pick them up and move them. So I get it professionally unassembled and reassembled in my basement. It's a three-piece slate, and the guys doing the job say it's got dead bumpers on it. Well, I didn't know what that meant at the time. So they wanted 500 bucks to redo it. They said it would require all new felt, and I figured I'd Google it and try and do it myself. And I figured if I screw it up, no harm, no foul. So I Googled the how-to process and started digging into it. I went online with billiards.com and found the parts, and they had all the pieces I think I needed, so I went ahead and ordered from them. I spent 100 and some change, and I got a few extras, but I purchased the rubber cushions and the cushion facings, is what they call those, and the feather strip, which came in a rolled up like a rubberized bundle. I don't know if some tables have them as a wooden slat piece or not, but mine was also, after I disassembled it, I found out it was also like a rubberized plastic. So then I took out these 12 bolts, there was two per rail, unstapled the pockets, and I wasn't sure how I was going to flip the whole rail system over by myself because I was the only one working on it. But then I got lucky because then this screw was missing from the other side of the pocket rail, and the two end rails just came out, and I flipped them up over on the table. And then I was able to get the long rails, the two pieces on the sides, and flip them over and take out those bolts and remove the side pockets. So then I ended up with 6 rail pieces, which was great. Then I put some plastic cover over the table, just extra protection, and put the leather cover over it, and then started working on the rails. And I figured I'd photograph how they were before I disassembled them and as I'm taking them apart so that I could see the marks on the felt and where it went because I was planning on reusing the old felt just because it looked really good. So after I got the felt off, I found this label on one of the rails and I Googled that. And come to find out, this is, the results were related to this model, which is a Leisure Bay. And that type of rubber that's on there, there's different profiles for these rails that I didn't know about. So if you Google these words, pool table rail rubber profile, you'll find a whole bunch of descriptions. And I was worried that I had bought the wrong kind of rail. So this is what billiards.com had. They only had two kinds, and I got the cheaper. And luckily that worked out for me. I got lucky because it matched exactly what I had had before. So I start to disassemble them and take the feather stripping and the felt off and start inspecting the rails and trying to get the rubber off, and it was a lot harder than the other videos made it look. It was really dry rotted and just glued on there like crazy. I couldn't break it off by hand. I tried prying at it and I damaged some of the rail with the screwdriver and the staple remover trying to get it off. I eventually found a pretty good way to get it off by slicing down the side with the staple remover, just kind of drawing at it like a knife, going over and over again, and then twisting it clockwise and counterclockwise and kind of getting it up under the rubber. And that worked for me. That helped me get it off without damaging the wood. So then I had a lot of chiseling to do to get the old glue off and the residue and all the other debris. And it was all over the rail. There's a raised bump on my rail. It doesn't look like every table has these, but there was a lot of excess glue down the sides, and I went ahead and cleaned it all off. I wanted as much actual wood exposed for the new glue, and didn't know, how well everything would set. So I figured I'm just gonna, since I got it apart, I'm just gonna clean it. This chisel worked really good down the facings where the pocket facings used to exist. It looks like I'm taking off some of the wood here, but that glue was so thick, all that lighter wood colored debris is actually glue. So it was very crystalline and kind of almost like a see-through, like a varnish or something. And I was able to get the top layer off and kind of sand it down and get either really close or actually expose the wood. It was um, there was a lot there. It was really thick. So once I got that down, checking the fit with a spare piece of new rubber and with the pocket facing, and I don't know if you can tell from the lighting there, the little bit of glaze that's still on there that was actually glue. So I'm going at it with sandpaper, by hand, and I had a block of wood that it wasn't working real good. So then I found a triangular block of wood, which worked great. I could get those angles in there just right. That's about an 80 grit or 100 grit, and went at it that way by hand. I didn't want to power tool it because I didn't know how deep, it might actually dig into the wood, and I wanted a real good straight flat surface, and doing it by hand just, I don't know. That's the way I did it, and it worked for me. So after a good cleaning, I glue on the rubber cushions, make sure they're facing the right way. I've got a lot of overhang on these, so I was able to cut off a piece and play with it to make sure I knew what I was doing when I was making this cut. If you overcut too much, then you can't fix it. So I didn't know how well it would sand down with the grinder and smooth it out. So I experimented with some of the excess. Here, as you're pulling on it, you don't want to pull too hard or it's going to snap back and actually be too short. I was using the wood as a guide, and you can see the striations in the rubber. I got about a 1/16 of an inch overhang. So I wanted to smooth that out with the Dremel. So I didn't try to make the cut perfect the first time. You can see the difference in the way the facings fit in there. On the Dremel, I went through a lot of these sanding pads. I was a little rough on them, and they kept tearing up and spinning off, so I'd have to replace them constantly. The rubber stunk. There's a bad smell there. It was pretty nasty. It was worse than like burning rubber. It kind of smelled like burning pigs or something. Pretty weird. So I get it all sanded down and brushed off, and I got a nice smooth surface for the pocket facings. You can see the after uh, photo there, and then I go ahead and glue on the facings. They went on pretty good. I had to hold them in place manually. I didn't want to tape them because I thought they might kind of get misshaped, and it was just kind of an odd angle. So I hold them on there for, I don't know, 30 seconds, and then come back and check them every minute or two and apply a little more pressure and make sure they're on there straight. And you got a lot of overlap on those facings, so I had to cut them off. Use a razor knife. You see I got a block of wood under there to hold the rail up at a certain angle. It made a world of difference for cutting and applying the feather stripping and everything. But also a new razor blade on the razor knife made another world of difference for cutting that. I don't have any good photos because it kind of went quick and I went past it, forgot to photograph it. So here's an old one of the old rail and how the end of it is shaped for how the pocket facing is shaped to fit on there. So I just tried to kind of mimic that and cut it with the razor knife after the glue had set and dried, and it came out really well. So next was replacing the felt and the feather strip here. There was a lot of creases and evidence of where it used to exist on the old felt, so it was real easy to get it in there. Um, Not so easy that it would pull out. I mean, there was definite traction there. But I tried tapping it in with a rubber mallet, and I was getting these undulations. It wasn't really flat enough, even with a block of wood. So I ended up using my thumbs, and it just worked really good that way. Then I stapled on the felt, and again, I didn't film it, but the, uh, the felt was real easy. I thought I'd have to buy an electric staple gun, but I ended up just using a manual one and popping them in there one at a time and pulling on the felt, make sure it was tight. I did have to go back and take a couple staples out and tighten it up. So there was a little bit of back and forth to get it all smooth and flat and nice and tight, but all in all, that was pretty easy compared to the other stuff I had to do on this. Then I started bolting it back together. I had to do the long rails first. I had to get these screws in the side pockets and connect all that up because these are kind of hidden. They are hidden once you flip it over and bolt it to the slate, then you can't get to those. The pockets had originally been stapled on, but here I screwed them on with some washers to make it stay better. I started to staple them and give it a little tug on it, and it were coming loose. And these were T50 staples, so they appeared to be the same exact ones that were in there originally, but it just wasn't holding too well. So I decided to just manually screw it to the table. So one last thing to do was to bolt the rails back on. Some of them had this guide pin that helped hold it in place while you were getting it secured to the table. I went around the table and laid the bolts out on the floor so I could kneel down and grab those with one hand while I'm holding the rail in place with the other, and at least get it secured to the table so it wasn't going anywhere. And here's the finished product. It came out really well. I'm really glad I did it myself. It was a good learning experience, and the bumpers made a world of difference. The new bumpers are great. You can see here in the video. Um, I don't have a good video of the old bumpers and how they were doing, but these new ones are just amazing. I was glad to have it back together, and it plays like new. So if you're doing this for somebody else, then do your homework. Don't take my word for it. Go watch the other videos and maybe get some more information before you dive into it. I hope that I provided a little extra, but that was my intention. That's the only reason I posted this, because it turned out to be quite a bit different than what I expected going into it. This hair penguin goo made a world of difference. It's really good stuff. It kept my rails in place. But this video was not sponsored by them. But in case you got some penguins that are running amok or exploding on top of your television set or whatnot, penguin goo is for you.